And you're going to want to place your sphere, you're going to use the cup. Don't try to freehand a circle. I also had a student try to do that once. And you're going to want to put it off center a little bit because you're going to be placing the cast shadow out there. I'm going to use the 2B very lightly. Don't push down too hard because it's going to be hard to get that line out when you're using your shading. So there's my circle with my 2B. Slightly off. Yikes. I think it shifted a little bit. That's not good. I'll figure it out. Alright. Now I'm also going to add a tabletop on this one. I'm going to put the table like around here. Right about there. Tabletop. And I'm going to lightly set up my cast shadow. So your cast shadow, and you can turn this if you need to. Your cast shadow is going to be compressed, a compressed ellipse. And you can go ahead and draw through on that. This is still 2B. Draw through on your ellipse, make sure it's curvilinear. About like that. Now remember, over here, your shadow is going to be a little bit cleaner edge than out there. So now this is where I'm going to clean it up a little bit with my kneaded eraser. It's still very light. So now I'm going to come in with my 2H. That's your lightest pencil, hardest and your lightest of the range that you're going to be using. I'm going to keep most of my drawing covered with my paper. And I'm going to come in with the side of my pencil and I'm going to start adding my shading. Now what's happening here is I can already tell that line is too dark. I can't pull it into my sphere yet. But what you can do is pull it into the background. So remember that highlight is pulled away from the edge. So out here, based on the darkness of that line, I have to make sure that whatever's out here is going to be dark enough to pull the value of that line into the value outside so that the line disappears. This is still my 2H. By the way, there are different qualities of pencils too. I bought more expensive pencils and they blend a little bit nicer. But I don't usually want to spend the money. So this is Statler. I think you guys have Generals and they work fine. But if you want to spend a little more money, I can't remember the brands, but I accidentally bought some better, somehow I got a hold of better quality pencils at one point. I was like, wow, these blend really nice. So right now I'm just pulling the value of those lines into that background. And if you go over a little bit, I still see that line. So I'm going to come probably back in with the 2B because I drew that line with the 2B. So don't push down too hard trying to make it darker with 2H because 2H is only going to take you so far in terms of how dark you can get it. So this is about it for 2H. So you want to kind of let that gradation disappear as it goes out away from your sphere out there. I'm going to darken all that up with my 2B a little bit later. So back on the inside, try to keep your value all even, not spotty. Still seeing that line. It's going to drive me crazy until I switch to 2B. Okay. So now we're coming back in here. Now remember to look at that handout in terms of directional mark making. So I'm kind of moving in the direction of the sphere, and you can turn your board like this. So I know this is going to be a long demo, so just be patient. Still trying to pull that darker value, that line out there. By the way, the darker you make it in the background, now you're going to work it up slowly. Don't be impatient with this. You got to be patient. Just be patient. It'll come. You're going to want to rush, and it'll become grainy. If you jump up too fast to a soft pencil, I'll be able to tell when I come over. I'm going to be like, did you use a 4B here? And you're going to be like, yes. I'll be able to tell if you went too fast to your 4B especially, because it starts getting really grainy. You're not going to get these nice soft transitions. So I'm going back to my writing position as I get close to that edge, because it's really hard to control in that drawing position when you get into tight spots like this. So as you get close to that edge, keep your pencil super sharp. And as you move away, go back to the side and try to blend it out, keeping it soft. Okay, so remember, I want to keep that highlight here. The highlight is going to be the white of the paper, you guys, okay? So make sure you maintain the white of the paper. As I move around here, I'm going to take out this ellipse in here now, because that's going to disrupt my mark making, maybe. So as I get out here, I'm going to make this a little bit lighter on this side, because the coarse shadow is going to be coming up pretty soon, and that's when you switch your values. I was telling you guys you have to decide if it's going to go dark or light. So let's go up right down. Coarse shadow, I'm going to pull in probably about here. So now I'm going back to my drawing position. I'm going to set up that coarse shadow. So remember, it's wrapping around that sphere. So make sure that you're using your mark making to describe the shape. So blending it out a little bit. Again, that 2H is only going to take you so far. Going into my midtones here, medium values, coarse shadow, reflected light. So that reflected light is always going to be darker than your highlight. It's never going to be as bright as direct light, reflected light. I'm going to darken up that coarse shadow a little bit more. But I know that 2H is not going to take me too far, so don't expect it to, because you'll start making marks on your paper. So I can already feel the graphite starting to blend at this point. I have enough on there where it's starting to blend nicely. And you'll feel it, because when you first start laying it on, you're going to feel the tooth of the paper a little bit. But as the graphite builds up, you'll notice it starts to blend really nicely. Now, if you get sort of imperfect marks, that's where you can come in with your kneaded eraser, and I would recommend just blotting it out a little bit to lighten it up, but don't pull, because it'll smudge and it'll also disrupt the tooth of your paper. So again, no smudging with your fingers. Please don't do that. I'll be able to tell also, by the way. Okay, so right about here is what I call the old switcheroo. I made that up. Because right here is where it's going to switch from light over dark to dark over light. So you need to maintain this a little bit lighter on this side in your background. Let it fade out. I'm going to try to keep my mark making consistent. So I'm going to go this way. By the way, the background doesn't have to be super smooth. You can show a few marks out there if you want. But right here, okay, this is the other tricky thing that might happen, is you might start to lose the edge in these switcheroo areas. So try to define them quickly before you lose that edge. You might have to redraw them with your cup if you lose that edge, because if you try to make it up, it's going to show. It's just so hard to draw a sphere or a circle, perfect circle, without a tool. So now I'm darkening this edge a little bit here on the inside, near the old switcheroo. And right here, it's going to switch back to light over dark. So this is a tricky area right here, and there's a tendency to lose your edge right around here. Okay, so a little bit more. So I'm going to throw a little bit of value down to here because you want to separate that tabletop. You're going to darken up that coarse shadow eventually, but you don't want to rely on line here. So you might want to lighten this a little bit, because you're going to want to pull that line into your value here. Okay, so I'm starting to get that value set up on there. Now we know the occlusion shadow and that cast shadow is the darkest area. So go back to that writing position, super sharp 2H pencil. Very gently though, don't push down too hard here. You're going to leave indentations in your paper. But you want to pull that dark edge into your cast shadow. Turn this upright. So I'm back in that drawing position. And then I'm going to try to maintain a little bit of a core out here. Remember, it's a little darker on that edge as you move into the light. But keep this soft out here. You're moving away from the sphere at this point. So your shadow is pretty soft. And you can always clean up the edges with your eraser later as well. So this is your cast shadow. Okay, so now I'm about to go into the 2B. You can see how different, drastically different 2B is from a 2H. And this little dot is bugging me, but it's there for good. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to a 2B. So again, 2H is hard and light. 2B is a little softer, and it's going to be a little darker. And once you set up that ground with your 2H, the 2B is going to blend in really nicely. If you jump to 2B before 2H, it's going to get super grainy. It's not going to blend well, and you're going to be really disappointed. And I'm going to get really upset. No, just kidding. But I will help you at that point and make you go back to your 2H. Start with that 2H. And challenge yourself. You know, how soft of blends can you get with these transitions? You can always go back to 2H as well. I do that a lot. Because if I feel like my 2B is getting too grainy, I'll soften it with the 2H, so I work back and forth. Right now I just want to kind of darken up that core shadow a little bit. Still using the side of my pencil. The only time you use the tip is when you're in a very tight spot, like on the edge of your sphere. So right in here is your occlusion shadow. Look how dark you can get with that 2B. But when we go to ebony or 8B, and careful, don't push down too hard again with any of these pencils, because it's going to start making indentations in your drawing. So a little darker on the edges, the coarse shadow. So it's quite a big jump into that 2B from your 2H. And again, if your marks start to get spotty, just pull them out. You can shape your kneaded eraser and sculpt it. You get little weird little dots. You can just pull them out. Sometimes it's paper irregularity, sometimes it's the change of pressure. And you can just start working on it to keep it nice and even. And again, as you get closer to that object, whoops, it's going to be a little sharper edges. Little sharper edges here. I kind of went outside the lines here, so I'm going to try to pull that out. A little darker here. So I'm going to turn this. Get a little closer to this edge with the tip. This is that old switcheroo area. Kind of losing it here. So be really careful when you get to this area here, because this is going to now go dark back here. This is where it switches. And the 2B is going to pull that line in a lot easier that you drew with the 2B earlier. And I'm going to go a little bit more upright here to make sure I keep this nice clean edge here. Be really particular here. You guys have better eyes than I do. So just color inside the line or outside the line, depending on which side you're on. So I'm already seeing a lot of marks here. I'm probably going to come back in with my 2H to kind of soften it up a little bit. Again, the darker you go out here, the more that sphere is going to pop. So I'm feeling the graphite blending nicely at this point, which is great. You'll feel the difference between the raw paper and adding graphite on top of graphite. So now I'm going to come back in with this is my 2H. And I'm going to try to blend all this in a little bit better. And if you go outside a straight area, you can always just cover it up with a piece of paper and clean it up like that. It's a little illustrator's trick. I'm trying to soften out all these dark marks, but I'm still going to go to 4B, so don't clean it up too much yet. Don't worry about it too much. So now I'm switching back and forth between 2B and 2H. Haven't gone to 4B yet. So 4B is when it really comes to life, because that's when you have start getting your full range of value. Remember, that thing is not going to look, oops, I went outside the line here. Maybe it's time for prescription glasses. Over-the-counter readers aren't doing it anymore. Okay, so take your time when you get toward those edges. You can see already. See, I made that mistake on purpose so that you guys won't do that. No, just kidding. Yeah, so take your time when you get toward those edges, because it's really easy to go outside the line and to lose the edge of your sphere. So the cup is here if you need to redraw it. So now I'm going to carry this 2H into here a little bit more, because that mid-tone is not dark enough for me yet. But you want to keep that highlight away from the edge of your sphere. So here's my highlight. These are my mid-tones. By the way, if you want to go crazy with this, you probably don't need to really. You could use a 4H. 4H is going to soften your transitions even more, but if you can get it to this point, this is great. Okay, so now, there's a little mark here. Sculpt your eraser if you get weird marks and just blot it. Now I'm going to add my 4B. So this is when the full range of values starts to happen. You do not need 6B or ebony. Look at how much darker that is. Take your time, keep it sharp here. It's going to, because it's a soft pencil, it's going to want to flatten out pretty quickly. So you might have to sharpen it a bunch of times, especially as you're getting close to the edge here. This is 4B now. And that's really as dark as you need to go on this drawing. So again, I'm going to go back to that writing position as I get toward that edge. Take your time. Building up that core shadow, you might want to start using this kind of movement. So you remember it's wrapping around the form. Don't go too dark on that core shadow because it is a white object, so it's not going to get super dark. Although, if it's nighttime and the lights are out, it could be pretty dark. Again, as I get close to that edge, I'm going to switch. Go a little darker here. And this is that tricky spot, the old switcheroo. You have to maintain that edge. You don't want it to disappear there. And then under here is your occlusion shadow. So this is where you want to go the darkest, right under here. And again, the darker your darks are, accompanied by the white lights, is when that thing is going to start feeling like it's popping off the page. Trying to create three-dimensionality on a two-dimensional surface. A little bit of a core out here, softer as it moves away. Ambient light in here. And the occlusion shadow is receiving the least amount of light, so that's why it's so dark under there. Again, your cast shadow, when it's near the object, is going to be a little sharper edged. It's going to get softer as it moves away. So see how well you can transition that. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Make sure you maintain an elliptical. When you first set up that cast shadow, make sure you draw through on that so that it feels like it's meeting up. And I think I'm going to call it a day on that. All right. Oh, so also on your cylinder and your cube. So when you go to set up your cube, you can use a ruler. I'm just going to use a straight edge here. I don't have a ruler handy. But remember, your verticals need to remain vertical. You also want it shifted off to the side so you can add a little bit more shadow here. So the edge of my box, maybe I'll put it like right, oh, I want to use a 2B. Let's use a 2B to set up these shapes. So back edge might be here, front edge here. So whatever this angle is, you got to look at your photo. Remember, this should be converging just a little bit, or at least parallel. So remember, you want these converging this way. Maybe this is converging this way, just a tiny bit, or parallel. Just make sure they're not opening up. I guess it would be, I made that too short. But make sure that these vertical lines are vertical. These are also going to be converging very slightly, or at least parallel. And these are also converging. So in every direction, consider that they need to be at least parallel or converging. And then when you go to draw your shadow down here, just lay it in like you did with the sphere. Lay it in loosely first, and then pull those edges into your form using 2H to start, starting with 2H. So 2H, 2B, 4B is really all you need for this. And as far as your cylinder goes, just remember, still laying this in with my 2B, the ellipse on the top, keep it elliptical, is going to be more compressed. You might want to push this off to the side a little bit more too. Then whatever's on the bottom, use your straight edge for your sides. And this ellipse is going to be slightly deeper. Remember to go around those corners, right? So maybe your cast shadow comes back like this. Your core, I'm just going to do this with the 2B just so you know. Look at that handout for the direction of your mark making. But your core on a cylinder, remember, is vertical. It's going to be something like this. But you're going to start this with your 2H. Let me sharpen this a little bit. Whoa! So watch your mark making on that. You can go up and down or around. This is your reflected light. You're going to have a little bit of value out here because the top is where the light is catching. The top is the lightest part. So a little value out here, coarse shadow. Doesn't have to be right in the middle. Just look at your reference that you have. I'll post some reference online as well. Reflected light. Also, the base of every object has a little cast shadow around here. So you want to add a little dark line under there and then pull that into your cast shadow. Occlusion shadow should be around here, etc. You may also want to add a tabletop here as well. Let me continue this tabletop so they feel like they're on the same table. And it would help to punch out your object. You can darken this without disrupting your cast shadow out there. So you want to darken this background out here. But again, start with that 2H, build it up slowly. I'm just doing this for a quick demo, show you how to set it up. Same on your square. So your cast shadow has to be below the bottom of your tabletop. If you add this tabletop here and add your value out here, it's going to help pop that thing out. And again, I would gradate it as you get close to the dark side. You want to let it get a little lighter on this side so that the dark is dark against light, light against dark. Always switching back and forth. Okay, does that make sense? All right, let's go ahead and get started.